Imagine a man who failed his exams 4 times, no army behind him, no noble bloodline, no political connections, just a village in southern China, a broken spirit, and a fever dream that would not leave him. Now imagine that same man, just a few years later, commanding millions of followers, ruling a rival kingdom from one of China's greatest cities, and threatening to bring the most powerful empire on earth to its knees. That is not fiction, and the war that followed would kill somewhere between 20 and 30 million people, more than most nations had in their entire populations. Yet if you ask most people outside of China today, they have never heard of it. This is FOREGONE Chronicles, and this is the story of the Taiping Rebellion, the forgotten war that nearly tore China apart and quietly shaped everything. To understand how one man's fever visions could ignite a catastrophe of this scale, you first have to understand the world he was born into. In the early 19th century, the Qing dynasty ruled China. On paper, it was one of the most powerful empires in the world. It governed hundreds of millions of people. Its territory stretched from the deserts of Central Asia to the Pacific coast. Emperors had commanded this land for 2 centuries. From the outside, it looked unbreakable. But empires rarely collapse from the outside first. Beneath the surface of Qing China, something was quietly coming apart. The population had exploded. By the early 1800s, China's population had more than doubled, but the land available to farm had not grown. Peasant families found themselves trying to survive on plots of soil that were shrinking with every generation. Hunger was not rare. It was routine, and the bureaucracy that was supposed to govern these people, to protect them, to tax them fairly, had grown deeply corrupt. Officials lined their own pockets. Relief during famines came slowly, if it came at all. The distance between those who held power and those who worked the land had become a chasm. Then came the foreign humiliation. The Opium Wars forced China to sign humiliating treaties with Western powers. Ports were opened. Trade terms were dictated from abroad. Silver flowed out of the country. The drug that had devastated countless Chinese families was protected by foreign law. For the people living through it, the message was clear. The dynasty could no longer protect its own people, could no longer protect its borders. The mandate of heaven was looking increasingly fragile. This is the kindling. What the story needed now was a spark. His name was Hong Xiuquan. Born in 1814 in Guangdong province, Hong came from a Hakka family. The Hakka were a minority community, often pushed to the edges of society, competing for land and opportunity in an already crowded world. Like many young men, Hong had one dream. Pass the imperial civil service examinations, pass those exams, and you became a government official. He studied. He prepared. He sat the exams. He failed. He tried again. He failed again. After his 3rd or 4th attempt, something in Hong Xiuquan broke. He fell gravely ill, took to his bed, and in that state, somewhere between sleep and fever, he began to see things. An elderly man with a golden beard appeared to him, handing him a sword, commanding him to go out and destroy demons. And beside that old man stood a younger figure, who called Hong brother. Hong did not understand the visions. Not at first. He recovered from his illness and returned to his life, but the images stayed with him. Then one day, years later, he came across a collection of Christian missionary pamphlets that had circulated through southern China. He read them slowly, and everything snapped into place. The old man with the golden beard was God the Father. The younger figure, who called him brother, was Jesus Christ, which meant Hong Xiuquan himself was the second Son of God, chosen, destined, sent, not to pass an exam, but to cleanse China. Most people who have visions of divine calling are forgotten within a generation. Hong Xiuquan was not most people, and what he would build next would shake an empire to its foundations. It sounds like the beginning of a cautionary tale. It was, in a way, but before the fall came something extraordinary. A movement, an army, a kingdom, and a war that would swallow an empire whole. Hong Xiuquan did not keep his revelation to himself. He began preaching. First to family, then to neighbors. His message was unlike anything people had heard before. Not quite Christianity, not quite traditional Chinese religion, but something new. He condemned idol worship. He rejected Confucian traditions that, in his view, had kept the poor in chains for centuries. He declared that the Qing dynasty, ruled by Manchu outsiders, had lost its right to govern, and he offered something that the hungry, the landless, and the desperate had almost given up hoping for. A promise. Land shared equally among all people, men and women treated as equals. Opium banned. Gambling outlawed. His followers called themselves the God-worshipping society. And they grew, slowly at first, then faster still. The Hakka communities flocked to Hung's message. Miners, displaced laborers, they came in thousands. As tensions sharpened into something harder, the God-worshippers stopped being just a religious movement. They became an army. In 1851, Hung Shuquan made it official. He declared the establishment of a new state. He called it the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom. He crowned himself the Heavenly King. His top commanders were given grand titles, kings of the East, West, North, and South. These were true believers, convinced they were instruments of divine purpose. That conviction made them dangerous. The Taiping army began to move. Town after town in southern China fell. Qing defenders crumbled or retreated. In 1853, Taiping forces captured Nanjing, one of China's great historical capitals. Hong Shuquan renamed the city Tianjin, the heavenly capital, and declared it the seat of his government. Women could serve in the military. Foot-binding was banned outright. Land was redistributed. Private accumulation of wealth was restricted. But power has a way of doing something to movements built on purity. It corrupts them. Young Shuking had risen to extraordinary influence by claiming he could channel the literal voice of God. Young wielded that power ruthlessly. He began to overshadow even Hong himself. Paranoia crept into the capital, and in 1856, it ignited. In an event called the Tianjin Incident, the Taiping leadership turned inward in a catastrophic purge. Followers of rival factions were massacred in the streets. Thousands died, not at the hands of the Qing, at the hands of each other. Empires and revolutions share a strange symmetry. Both are held together not just by force, but by belief. The Taiping Heavenly Kingdom had shaken an empire. Now, slowly, it began to shake itself. The Taiping Heavenly Kingdom had done something no one thought possible. It had built a rival government. It had governed tens of millions of people under a radical new vision of society, and then it had begun tearing itself apart. The internal purge of 1856 had shattered the unity that made the Taiping so formidable. Commanders were dead. Trust was gone. And while the Heavenly Kingdom looked inward, the Qing dynasty was quietly rebuilding its capacity to fight back. The final act of this war would be long, and it would be merciless. Act 6. The counteroffensive. The Qing dynasty had learned a painful lesson. Its traditional imperial armies were not enough. They were slow, often corrupt. So, the dynasty tried something different. It empowered regional leaders to raise their own forces. One man, above all others, rose. His name was Zheng Gofan, a Confucian scholar of Fisha from Hunan province, who seemed an unlikely military commander. He was bookish. He was methodical. But he understood you could not fight an ideological army with a paycheck army. Zheng built the Xiang army, a force recruited from loyal local communities, bound by regional pride and personal loyalty. He drilled them. He disciplined them, and slowly, painstakingly, the Qing began to take back ground. At the same time, foreign powers began to make their choice. Western governments had initially been uncertain, but as stability evaporated, the calculation changed. The West backed the Qing. A foreign-led force, the ever-victorious army was formed. Though modest in size, it was disproportionately effective. Deploying modern weapons and tactics, the noose was tightening. Act 7. The fall of the heavenly capital. By the early 1860s, the Taiping Kingdom was a shadow of its former self. Inside the heavenly capital, Hong Shuquan had become a ghost. He had retreated into isolation, into scripture. In 1864, with imperial forces surrounding the city, Hong Shuquan died. The man who declared himself the Son of God was gone. Weeks later, Qing forces breached the walls. The heavenly capital was consumed in fire and blood. The rebellion was over. Between 20 and 30 million people dead. Entire provinces depopulated. Cities reduced to ruins. Farmland abandoned. Act 8. The Long Shadow. The Qing dynasty had survived, But survival is not the same as strength. The war had exposed the old imperial system. Regional commanders like Zheng Gofan had risen to power through private armies. The dynasty had been saved by men it could no longer fully control. The economy was devastated. The human capital erased. In 1911, the Qing dynasty collapsed. China's great revolutions would grapple with the same forces the Taiping unleashed. The Taiping Rebellion was the first great rehearsal, the first proof that the old China could be challenged from within. This has been FOREGONE Chronicles, the stories history left behind, and why they still matter.